Racism is still a big problem in 2025. It's not just in the US, it happens in every country, on every continent. The United States has made a lot of progress over the years, but even with new laws and growing awareness, racism hasn't gone away. It shows up in many ways, in jobs, schools, traffic stops, and even housing. Racism isn't only found in one place. Every country has a history of it. Some people treat others badly just because they look or speak differently. Sadly, this kind of thinking still exists everywhere. In a way, racism is like war. People say they want peace, but war keeps happening. In the same way, racism keeps showing up, even when most people want it to end. In this video, we'll look at the 10 most racist states in the US today. We'll talk about what makes them stand out and the reasons behind it. Let's get started. Arizona is one of the few Western states to appear on this list. Most of the states we'll talk about are in the South, but Arizona stands out for different reasons. The state has a large Hispanic population, especially near the border. But even with that, Arizona still struggles with racism and unfair treatment toward minority groups. Over the years, Arizona has been called out for its strict immigration laws. Many people say these laws come from deeper problems within the state's culture and politics. Some laws have made life harder for immigrants and people of color, and that has added to the tension. Hate crime data shows a troubling pattern. In Arizona, over 71% of bias-related crimes are based on race, ethnicity, or ancestry. That means most hate crimes in the state are driven by how someone looks or where they come from. These numbers and policies show that Arizona still has a long way to go when it comes to equality and fair treatment for everyone. South Carolina's troubled past with slavery and segregation still shapes life in 2025. In May 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the state's new congressional map, rejecting claims that it weakened black voting power. Concerns about voting rights did not stop there. Voters approved a constitutional amendment in November 2024 that adds language saying only U.S. citizens may vote. Supporters call it a safeguard. Critics say it could be used to block eligible residents from the polls. South Carolina also remains one of just 2 states without a hate crime statute. The Clementa C. Pinckney Hate Crimes Act passed the House but stalled again in the Senate during the 2024 session, leaving the state with no enhanced penalties for bias-motivated offenses. The absence of that law is striking because hate crime reports are rising fast. FBI data show 115 hate crime offenses in 2023, nearly double the 2022 figure, and 61% were driven by bias related to race, ethnicity, or ancestry. These recent events and numbers keep South Carolina near the top of any list of states still struggling most with racism. North Carolina has a long and complicated history when it comes to racial issues, especially around voting rights. Discrimination against African Americans in the voting system goes back to generations, and today, the state is still in the news for many of the same concerns. In recent years, North Carolina has passed strict voting laws that critics say make it harder for some people to vote. These laws include tight voter ID rules and the removal of names from voter rolls. While the idea of requiring ID might sound fair on the surface, the process of getting that ID can be difficult for many people, especially those living in poor or rural areas. Offices that issue voter IDs are often far away, and long wait times make it even harder for people without transportation or flexible schedules. These laws have led to legal battles and protests, with many civil rights groups saying the changes hurt minority and low-income communities the most. When it comes to hate crimes, the numbers tell their own story. In 2023, North Carolina reported that nearly 80% of its bias-related crimes were based on race or ancestry. About 13% were related to sexual orientation, and just over 6% were linked to religion. Even though North Carolina has some large and diverse cities, these issues show that discrimination and inequality are still serious problems across the state. That's why it ranks number 8 on this list. Texas is one of the most diverse states in the country, with large communities of Hispanic, Black, Asian, and immigrant residents. But despite that diversity, the state still faces serious issues with racism and discrimination. One major area of concern is immigration. In recent years, Texas has passed or proposed strict immigration laws. In early 2025, state lawmakers backed bills to allow state police to arrest people they suspect of crossing the border illegally. Many believe these laws target target Hispanic communities and create fear among immigrants, whether they're documented or not. Texas has also been in the news for new voting laws. Critics say some of these changes, such as tighter ID requirements and fewer polling places, make it harder for people of color to vote. Civil rights groups have filed lawsuits, saying the new rules unfairly affect Black and Latino voters. When we look at hate crime data, the numbers are concerning. In 2023, the Department of Justice reported that about 70% of hate crimes in Texas were related to race or ancestry. Around 17% were due to sexual orientation, and 7.5% were linked to religion. A smaller but growing share, 1.9%, was related to gender identity, showing that attacks against the LGBTQ+ community are also rising. Even though many people in Texas are welcoming and respectful, the statistics show that racism and bias are still major problems in the state. That's why Texas comes in at number 7 on this list. Arkansas still struggles with the weight of its past. Schools in the state remain sharply unequal, and new research shows that segregation between Black and white students has increased, not decreased, since the early 1990s, even in growing areas like Northwest Arkansas. Voting rights are another point of conflict. In August 2024, lawmakers approved rules that block digital signatures for voter registration forms and ban the gender-neutral X marker on driver's licenses, steps that civil rights groups say make it harder for many residents to register and vote. Then, in May 2025, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a ruling that limits who can sue under the Voting Rights Act, weakening challenges to unfair maps in Arkansas and 6 neighboring states. Hate crime data underlines the problem. The Justice Department counted 31 hate crime offenses in 2023. About 58% targeted someone's race or ancestry, while 16% were tied to religion and 16% to sexual orientation. Smaller shares involved disability, gender, or gender identity. Arkansas enacted a limited hate crimes measure in 2021, but critics note that it omits explicit protection for LGBTQ people and is so broad that it is hard to enforce. Taken together, lingering school segregation, new barriers to voting, and continuing bias-motivated crimes, these facts place Arkansas at number 6 on the list of states where racism remains most visible in 2025. What would your top 5 look like? List them in the comments. I'll be reading through and responding to the most interesting ones. Think I missed something? Or maybe you've got a story that proves me right or wrong. Georgia has come a long way over the decades, especially when compared to how things were in the 1950s. But even with that progress, racism and discrimination are still serious issues across the state. Georgia has a deep history of racial injustice, going back to slavery and segregation. In more recent years, the state has been at the center of major voting rights debates. During the 2020 election, Georgia made national headlines after passing stricter voter ID laws and removing thousands of people from the voter rolls. These changes were criticized by civil rights groups, who said they were aimed at making it harder for Black voters and other minorities to cast their ballots. The problems didn't stop there. In 2021 and 2022, more voting laws were passed that made things like mail-in voting and ballot drop boxes more limited. Many of these laws are still being challenged in court, even in 2025. When we look at hate crime data from the Department of Justice, the numbers speak for themselves. In Georgia, 67.3% of all bias-motivated crimes are based on race or ancestry. About 13.3% are tied to religion, and 12.2% are due to sexual orientation. There's also growing concern about other types of discrimination. Around 3.7% of hate crimes target people with disabilities, and 2% involve gender identity. These numbers show that bias in Georgia isn't just focused on one group, it affects many different communities. That wide range, along with the state's voting controversies, puts Georgia at number 5 on this list. Tennessee has a long history of racial inequality, and even in 2025, many of those problems still remain. Like several other southern states, Tennessee has faced repeated criticism for how it handles education, voting rights, and racial bias. In the school system, the state continues to struggle with segregation and underfunding, especially in districts that serve mostly minority students. This has led to fewer college opportunities for many students of color, which in turn affects long-term job prospects and income levels. The result is a cycle of poverty and limited upward mobility, inequality that still shapes life for many communities in the state. Tennessee has also been called out for voter suppression efforts. Advocates say that laws and policies, such as felony disenfranchisement and strict ID rules, disproportionately affect voters of color. Some groups continue to challenge these laws in court. According to the most recent hate crime data, about 70% of bias-motivated crimes in Tennessee are based on race or ancestry. Another 20% target sexual orientation, while religion is the motive in around 5% of cases. Crimes based on gender identity make up about 2.5%. These numbers show that while racism may not be visible to everyone in day-to-day life, it still plays a major role in how systems work in Tennessee, and that's why it ranks number 4 on this list. Louisiana has one of the most difficult racial histories in the country. Even today, the effects of that past are still deeply felt. The state has a large African American population, yet many people of color still face serious barriers, especially in areas like housing, employment, and the criminal justice system. Louisiana is often called out for having one of the harshest prison systems in the country. Studies show that people of color, particularly black residents, are far more likely to be arrested, charged, and given longer sentences compared to white residents for similar offenses. These patterns have drawn attention from both national civil rights groups and local activists, who continue to push for reform. Racial inequality also shows up in daily life. In many neighborhoods, black residents have fewer economic opportunities and face challenges finding quality housing or stable jobs. These problems have continued for generations and are part of the reason Louisiana ranks so high on this list. According to the Department of Justice, 67.5% of all hate crimes in Louisiana are based on race or ancestry. Another 15% involve sexual orientation, while 12.5% are linked to religion. Crimes targeting people with disabilities account for 2.5%, and gender identity-related crimes are less than 1%. Even with diverse and culturally rich cities like New Orleans, known for being more open and inclusive, racism and bias are still widespread across the state. That mix of a harsh justice system and ongoing discrimination places Louisiana at number 3 on this list. Alabama ranks near the top of this list for a reason. The state has one of the most well-known and deeply rooted histories of racial discrimination in the country. During the Civil Rights era, Alabama was at the center of many major battles, marches, protests, and violent clashes that highlighted the fight for equal rights. For decades, Alabama enforced segregation laws that kept black and white communities separate in schools, restaurants, housing, and more. These laws were in place until the 1960s, and their impact can still be felt today in the form of unequal education, housing inequality, and limited economic opportunities for people of color. In more recent years, Alabama has also been criticized for passing harsh immigration laws. These laws have been called out for encouraging racial profiling and creating fear among immigrant communities, especially among Latinos. Civil rights groups continue to challenge many of these laws in court. The data adds even more weight to Alabama's place on this list. According to the Department of Justice, 78.6% of hate crimes in the state are based on race or ancestry. Another 17.9% are related to religion, while 3% are based on sexual orientation. Reports of hate crimes based on gender identity or disability are very low in official statistics, but many advocates say underreporting remains a problem. Alabama fits the image of a Deep South state still struggling with racism in both its systems and its culture, and that's why it stands at number 2 on this list. Mississippi has one of the most painful and well-known histories of racism in the United States. From slavery to the Jim Crow era, the state played a major role in enforcing and protecting racial segregation and inequality for generations. Today, Mississippi still has the highest percentage of African Americans of any state. But even with that, black residents continue to face major challenges, especially in education, housing, employment, and healthcare. Access to quality schools and jobs remains unequal, and many areas with majority black populations experience higher poverty rates and fewer resources. Mississippi's past is also marked by violence. In the 1960s, it was the site of some of the most infamous civil rights tragedies, including the murders of activists who were fighting for voting rights and racial justice. Those events may have happened decades ago, but the impact is still felt today. When it comes to hate crime statistics, the numbers are striking. According to the latest data, 87.5% of all bias-motivated crimes in Mississippi are based on race or ancestry. Another 12.5% are related to religion. Reports involving sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability are extremely low, but that may also reflect underreporting. Mississippi continues to carry the weight of its past, and the challenges that remain today are real. That's why it ranks number 1 on this list. All right, that's it for today. Hope you got something out of it, maybe even learned a thing or two. Now go enjoy your day, and yeah, be good to one another.